Welcome to Train Signal. You're watching how to push software onto a lot of machines without getting up from your desk. Because, again, that's what being an administrator is all about, right? So we're going to be talking about using group policy objects to install software. And we're going to be looking just a little bit at adjusting group policy that affects group policy at the domain level. So in this video, we're going to start off with just a quick review and a quick look at where we have been and what we've built. And then we're going to start off by taking a look at creating a group policy object for software installation. Now, just so you know, it's not that hard. I mean, it's really pretty easy to do, and I'm going to walk you through it step by step. We're going to install a little PDF reader, a real lightweight PDF reader, all across the clients on our entire Globomatics network. So, pretty easy stuff. But then I want to talk to you a little bit about when does all this group policy stuff actually take effect. Because after this one, we will have created, a couple of different group policy objects, and I just want to take you through just a touch of theory and a couple of additional group policy objects settings that apply at the domain level that actually control when group policy gets applied. So we'll just kind of go through that real quickly and then roll on to the next one. So let's take a look at where we have been and what we have built so far. We have built our globomatics.com domain. We've created our New York organizational unit. We have two separate organizational units that basically split up our users from our computers, so that way we can use group policy objects that are set for each of those separate areas. We can use these two, map drives and desktop lockdown, only for the users, so that way no matter what computer users log into, these group policy objects will follow them all around the network. Remember that when we built desktop lockdown in terms of the executive group, remember we exempted Hank and anyone else we're going to put in the executive group from desktop lockdown, so they will not actually get any of the settings from this particular group policy object. Then down here in the computer arena, we have our standard computers, which has the computer lockdown side, which also has that loopback processing installed on it, which applies that extra user setting no matter who sits down at that computer. And last but not least, we also have our privileged computers, which has no GPO link, so any of the three machines that we put into here will have any group policy actually applying to them. So that's what we have built so far. We got quite a bit of work done in a pretty short amount of time. Let's go ahead and let's jump on into building this group policy object for software installation. So here's the deal. I mean, we need to have some kind of PDF reader. And, well, it turns out that Hank went to a basketball game, and as Hank does, he sits around and starts chatting everybody up. And it turns out that he sat next to a guy from another software company, and this company produces a very lightweight PDF reader. And since you haven't installed any PDF reading software yet from Adobe or anywhere else, Hank decides, hey, why don't you take my new Buddy software, why don't you install it on every client on the network? Okay, well, that's not that hard, but, how are we going to do that? Are we going to, A, walk around with a CD or USB stick to every single one of your 25 machines, log in as the administrator, and install it manually? Because remember, we locked our users out of installing software altogether, and we also have user account control enabled. So that means we're going to have to do something, right? I mean, if we're going to lock people out of installing software, that means that we as administrators are going to have to make that happen now. We could, B, put the software on a shared folder and provide instructions for all the employees on how to install it, and they can install it whenever they need a PDF reader. So, I mean, that is an option, but that means that you would have to turn off all of our group policy stuff we set up already, right? Because our group policy stuff actually prevents our users from installing software by pretty much any means. So we'll talk about that in a second. And here's a third option. We could post the software in a shared folder and then create a group policy object that will install the software the very next time the machine restarts. All right, well, let's take a look at these three. First of all, on option A, do you really have that much time on your hands? I mean, walking around at 25 machines, logging in, and then installing the software? If you're on billable time and you just need to burn some hours, I say, hey, go for it. On option C, My reaction is, are you insane? I mean, why would you try to let users do that? Users, first of all, they can't install software anyway because you won't let them from the group policy stuff, right? But also, users are not administrators. Users are generally less computer savvy than you as the administrator are. And so if you choose this option, that means you're going to get deluged by a lot of telephone calls to your help desk or to your own personal cell phone. So this is not a good option because they won't remember the instructions. They won't remember that you emailed them instructions. They won't remember where to find them. If you print them out on a piece of paper, the paper will get thrown away. So a lot of good reasons not to do this. So obviously, option C is going to be our best option here. We're going to do the whole group policy thing. So hopefully I've talked you into that at this point. What we need to do for a software installation GPO. First of all, we need an MSI file for installation. Now, an MSI file, by the way, it stands for Windows Installer or Microsoft Installer. A lot of times you'll see the words Windows Installer, 6 in one, half dozen of another. But you need to try to get an MSI version of the software package at all, because here's the deal. Most software applications, you already know this, come in .exe packages, right? You double click on the .exe file and it just installs. Well, with our group policy option, you can't just take a .exe file and throw it onto a group policy object. It doesn't work like that. Now, there is a way that you can actually take a .exe file and repackage it into .msis, and there are several different .msi repackaging utilities out there. You'll just go to Google, Yahoo, and type in MSI packaging utility, and you'll get a bunch. You know, most of them cost a few bucks, but if you're going to be doing a lot of software installations over your network using this technique that we're going to be going through, it's worth the time to learn those repackaging software, and then it's worth the dollars. Now, there is an alternative installation package called the Zap package, which supposedly you can take a .exe file and wrap it into this Zap package format and use the Zap package along with this group policy installation technique that we're going to be walking through. But here's the deal, I don't recommend it. I haven't had a lot of good fortune with it, and it's probably going to cause you some headaches. So again, try to get a .msi version of the software package if the company has it, if your vendor has it available at all. But if they don't have it available at all, find yourself a good MSI repackaging utility. Alright, so once we have the .msi, the Windows installer package available for us, we need a shared folder for that MSI file for that software to go live in that all of your users and computers that are going to have at least read access to. Now, as the software is installing, it's obviously going to download from the shared folder to the client machine and do its thing. So, you know, it doesn't have to live there necessarily permanently, but it needs to live there while that group policy object is in existence. And of course, this is a duh statement, I know, but you need a new group policy object linked to the appropriate OU. Now, let's talk about that for just a second here. Here's the deal. Which OU that you decide to link this new group policy object to is going to determine which side of group policy that you do the software installation on. Here's the deal. You can do software installations on both sides of your group policy. You can do software installation on the computer. And by the way, this is where you're probably going to do most of your software installation, especially if you have your computers grouped up really well inside of organizational units to begin with. But you can also install software according to user. As you see what I'm circling over here, we also have software installation on the user side. This is generally not done, just so you know, due to the fact that, I mean, let's face it, software is not going to install into the user profile. Software is going to be installing to the computer's hard disk somewhere probably on the C drive. But again, to kind of boil this down, if you're going to link this group policy object for software installation to an organizational unit that contains only computer accounts, well, then you need to set up your software installation on the computer configuration side. Now, if you are going to link this group policy object to the users, to an OU filled with users, I should say, then you're going to use the user configuration side of group policy. So I know it's kind of elementary, but I just wanted to quickly point that out, because if you link this GPO to an organizational unit filled with users and you've set it up on the computer configuration side, it's not going to do you any good. Okay? All right, so here's the deal. We have a couple of options for software. If you set up your software installation on the user side, we can do what we call publish. Now you'll see here that in my little screenshot, publish is grayed out because I actually have the software installation on the computer configuration side selected. But if you're doing it on the user side, you can publish the software so that users can install it on demand. Now then, obviously that's going to require you to elevate their privileges a little bit and provide access for the users via group policy so they can actually install software. Now, you can also assign the software so that it installs on the client computer on the next restart. This is going to be your most popular option, because when you assign software, all the machine has to do is reboot. There's no special permissions or privileges necessary. Reboot the machine and the software will install under your administrative credentials. Now here's the deal. If you set up the GPO on the computer side, you can't publish, only assign. And you see here that's what's happening here, like I mentioned to you in just a moment. So you're really going to need to really use your best judgment, okay, based on who needs this particular software package when you're selecting which side of a GPO to use for software installs. Now, let's say you have software that you're going to install to 3 computers in your entire network, 3 clients, even 2 servers, by the way. You just need to stop and think about how you're going to perform that. If those 3 computers you're going to be installing this software onto are in a separate organizational unit already, it's pretty easy and pretty clear. However, don't forget the whole security filtering thing that we looked at earlier as well. Security filtering can allow you to link a group policy object for software installation to an organizational unit, but then you can filter out who gets that software inside of that GPO and who doesn't. And probably the easiest way to do that would be to have that software object only apply to certain groups inside of that organizational unit. Right now, there's also an advanced option. When we get in more into the demo, I'm going to talk you through that a little bit. I really want to show you some cool stuff in there, but I'll talk about that when we're actually into the demo a little bit more. So what are we going to do now? Hank's Buddy has sent you the .msi file. You can use it for your software installation GPO. Now you decide that you're going to install on every single client computer because, well, PDFs are a universal standard, and there's never going to be a user probably in the company who's not going to need to actually view a PDF. So here's what we're going to do to install this software on every single computer. We're going to create a new shared folder on mem1, and we're going to name it software. We're going to create a folder inside of software named Foxit. And by the way, that's the name of the software package I'm going to be installing during the demo section. And then we're going to take the MSI package that we got from Hank's Buddy, and we're going to drop it into that particular folder. Here's a quick note. Always create new folders for each software package, so that way your process for installation is nice and easy and you won't have any weirdness happening. All right, then we're going to create a new GPO. We're going to link it to NY computers, and we're going to name it Foxit Install. Okay, in the computer section of the group policy object, and we are going to be installing it to the computer side because it's just easier. You know, with the computer side, we're going to assign it, and we're just going to have our users reboot their machines. But anyway, once we're into the computer section of the GPO, we're going to go to software settings under the policy section to get the software installation settings. Then we're going to create a new package by right-clicking and selecting new package. We're going to pick the MSI file that's living out there on our shared folder on mem1. We're going to select the assigned option. Then we're going to run gp update /force. Okay. Now we could wait for the refresh interval, and by the way, the refresh interval, every 90 minutes by default, your computer goes back and talks to Active Directory and says, hey, you got anything new? And if there's something new, it gets applied. If it doesn't, then it gets ignored. But since this is a software installation, in order for the software to install, the software actually installs pre-logon. Okay? It does not install while the user is logged on. So the user is going to have to log off or restart the computer in order to actually get this software package downloaded and installed on their machine. Alright, so enough talky about this. Let's go ahead and let's get into this. I want to show you how this is done. Alright, so here we are over on client 1. You notice here that our DCs are down here on remote desktop, and here is mem1. And here is our foxitreader.msi package. I'll right click on this guy and go into its properties just so you see that this is in fact a Windows installer.msi package. Okay, big surprise, right? You see that's not very large. It's only 3.65 megabytes, pretty small, so it should install pretty fast. And it's not going to eat up a huge amount of our network bandwidth to install it in this fashion. Let's go ahead and close this here real quick. What we'll do now is I'm going to right click on this guy and copy it. I'm going to go over here to our mem1 server. And tell you what, let's just go ahead and put this on the sales folder, on the sales partition. I'm going to right click and I'm going to make a new folder. And you can really do this anywhere. I mean, it really doesn't make too much difference where the shared folder goes and lives, as long as you got enough space for it, right? Now you notice that I'm putting this on the mem1 server. That is really kind of our current file server that we're using. I'm going to go ahead and share this guy out. And I'm going to share this to everyone, and we'll just give everyone read permissions, and that should do the job. I'm going to click on share, and now click on done. I should remember what the name of this is real quick. ny-mem1-2k8/software. I'm going to tell it done, and now I'm going to go into software, and now in this software folder I'm going to create another new folder for the Foxit PDF reader. There we go. I'm going to go into the Foxit folder, right click, and paste that MSI that I copied from the desktop of client 1. This is one of the reasons why I love remote desktop, because I can transfer stuff back and forth between the client and the server that I happen to be using. Alright, so that's all we needed to do. So real quickly, one more time, we went to the sales drive, or I should say the sales partition. I made a shared folder named software. I created another folder inside of it for the Foxit and pasted it. I mean, it's pretty elementary stuff so far, right? Alright, so now we're done with mem1. Let's go ahead and let's minimize that guy. And now let's go to DC1. I guess we could go to DC2 if we wanted to, too. It doesn't make too much difference because both DCs are pretty much identical, right? But we'll do our work on DC1. Now I'm going to go here into the server manager for DC1, and I'm going to go to features, and inside of features is my group policy management. Now remember, I could always get to it by going to start, administrative tools, and group policy management too. Doesn't matter which place that you actually apply this policy. Let's go ahead and stretch this guy out a little bit so we can see what's going on here underneath group policy management. I'll expand the forest of Globomantics. Let's expand the domains and expand Globomantics here. And here's our OU structure. We'll go ahead and go into New York OU. And now, here's our New York computers. We're going to be creating and linking a brand new GPO for this particular installation. So I'm just going to right click on NY computers and select create a GPO in this domain and link it here. And I'm going to call this guy, I'll call it PDF. Actually, I'm going to call it PDF reader install. Okay. Doesn't matter what you call it. You can name it Spot if you wanted to. Okay, we'll just tell it OK. That will create a new group policy object here underneath the group policy objects folder, and it links it to the NY computers. So I'm just going to right click here on the PDF reader install, and I'll select edit, and that should bring up my group policy management editor, no problem. And now I'm going to go into the computer configuration side underneath policies, going into software settings and then software installation. Go ahead and stretch this guy out here too a little bit so we can see everything that's happening over on this side. I'm going to right click out here in this white blank space because you'll see that there's no current software installation packages right now. I'm going to right click, select new, and select package. And now you'll notice here that I kind of cheated because, well, I was messing around with this before, so it remembered where the item was. But if I was actually going to go from scratch, I would actually have to go to //ny-mem1-2k8 and then go into the software folder, go into Foxit, and select the Foxit reader. So you just browse for where that software package is living at. No big deal, right? Now we are going to assign this package. We're going to have it automatically installed when the client machines restart. Now we're going to go into advanced. I want to show you some very cool things that this can do. So we'll go into advanced. I'm going to tell it OK. Now here's the deal. Not only can you actually install the software, but you can also uninstall the software from here, and you can also upgrade the software from here, and you don't have to get up from your desk. Okay, that's very inviting to a lot of people. It's very appealing to a lot of administrators because it's going to save you a massive amount of time. Now here's the thing, you can also uninstall this application when it falls out of the scope of management. Here's what that means. Let's say that you sell this computer off to someone and they rejoin it to a new domain. Well, if they take that computer and rejoin it to a new domain, or they make it a part of a work group, this software package we're installing with group policy will automatically uninstall. This will save you some licensing headaches, so you don't have to worry if some of your licenses for Microsoft Office 2007 are flying around out there. So a very handy little tool. We can go to the Upgrades tab, and we can have one package upgrade another package. Now, we're not going to do that at this point in time because, we're doing a software installation for the first time. But you can select a very specific group policy object that you currently have. If I click on Browse, I don't have any to do that with right now, but I can select a very specific group policy object that contains a software installation setting and actually have this package upgrade the package. So it's very, very cool. We're not going to do that at this point in time. Oops, one more thing though. I could first uninstall the existing package and then install the upgrade package. Or I can have the package upgrade over the existing package. Now that's going to depend on the actual software you're installing, just so you know. Some software requires that you uninstall the previous version, right? Some software you can just install right over the top, and all it will do is alter some of the files. But you're going to have to get information from your software vendor about which one you need to do for this kind of task. So we'll cancel that. So those are the major things that I wanted to show you inside of the advanced. I'm just going to tell this guy OK. You'll notice here that it is already assigned, but let's say that you want to uninstall it. I'm going to right click on this guy, go to all tasks, and I can select remove. Here's a very cool thing. Not only can you install and upgrade, like I said, but I also told you can remove and uninstall the software by sitting at your desk, right? Well, here it is. You can select the removal method. You can completely uninstall the software from the users and computers. By the way, this does require a restart of the client again. Or you could just allow the users to continue to use the software, but the software simply won't do any new installations. All right, so you can select that. I'm going to cancel this for the time being because, well, we haven't even installed the software package yet, right? So again, keep in mind that using this software installation box, you can install software remotely, you can upgrade software remotely, and you can remove software remotely. And I just think that's way cool. This, I promise you, this will save you so much time if you really get to know it really well. By the way, I could actually add an additional package into the mix as well, but I'm not going to because I don't have any other software packages to install. So this group policy setting is finished. Let's go ahead and let's go back to our desktop here. We're going to go ahead and move over to our client 2 machine. I'm going to do this on the virtual machine rather than on the remote desktop because I want you to see what it's actually going to look like when you go to install it. But before we do that, let's go to the start menu. Let's open up, you know what, we can't do that from here, can we? We need to run GP update /force. In order to do that, we need to go back to DC1. So back over here to DC1, going to the start menu, we'll type CMD, and now I'm going to run GP update /force. And going to hit the enter key. I really should wait just a little bit until this policy is pushed down to all of the machines before I start bouncing over to our other machines. And by the way, we're going to see this install on two different machines, client 1 and, or I'm sorry, client 2 and client 3. There we go. User policy has completed successfully. Well, big deal. That's really not what we're working with. But the computer policy update has also completed successfully. So we're good to go. Let's go ahead and let's minimize our remote desktop. I'm going to go to the CL2 virtual machine next. There we go. And now let's see who's logged into this right now. Lance Binga. All right. So L Binga is installed, or I'm sorry, logged onto the machine here. Let's go ahead and let's log Lance off real quick. And you know, we really need to do actually a reboot. So let's just go ahead and restart the machine here real quick. When you have a software installation GPO, the download of the software and the installation of the software is going to happen before the user logs on. So when I go to log on as Lance Binga again, here's what's going to happen. The machine is actually going to take a little while to pause before I actually see anything happen. So while this guy here is restarting and rebooting, before the user gets to do pretty much anything else, you'll notice here it's kind of pausing because this is a computer-based policy, right? So before anything else happens, the software that we selected in the group policy object is downloading to the machine right now and is installing. So now when I go to log on as L Binga, and let's see here. Oops, looks like I need to type in the password correctly. When the machine restarts and reboots, hey, there it is. There's the Foxit reader. So I can go ahead and open this guy up here real quick. Ta-da! Pretty amazing, isn't it? All right, let's do this one more time. Let's bounce on over to one more client. I'm going to go to CL3 this time. And we need to go ahead and restart this guy as well so that that software can download and install. And this time I won't talk all the way through the restart. I'll just pause the video real quickly and it'll come right back as soon as the machine has come back up. Alright, so client 3 has restarted here. You'll notice that I'm still getting that please wait, that little pause while the machine downloads and installs that little Foxit software piece. There we go. Didn't take very long at all. So now I'll just go ahead and log in as L Binga on this machine too. It's not going to hurt anything. And by the way, once this machine CL3 has had that software installed, it will not reinstall the software every time. Okay. Once Foxit Reader is installed, as you see it is, fantastic. Open it up, there it is. Remember that this is a computer-based policy, and no matter who logs onto this machine, they should have access to this little software piece. Alright, so hopefully you see at this time, I mean, this is a very powerful technique. You know, using group policy to get software out to all of your users. Now, for 25 machines, would it take you that long to install a little software piece? No, probably about 3 or 4 hours. But you know, you could save 3 or 4 hours by doing it with the method that I just showed you. So why would you walk around to every single one of your 25 clients in your network with a CD-ROM or a USB stick and install it that way? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. Now, think about this. Let's say that you're in a network that has 500 clients. Okay? Obviously, installing software patches, updates, and really any kind of software that a mass amount of users are going to need for their work. This kind of technique, this technique in particular, is worth the price of admission just in the time it's going to save you alone. Okay? All right, so now at this time I have shown you several different kinds of group policy settings. I've shown you how to build group policies. We've talked about GP Update Force. Remember that GP Update Force is going to push down all of the new group policy objects and settings to your users and computers. But what if you don't use GP Update /force? Okay, let's bounce on over to the slides. I want to take a few minutes here. I want to talk with you about when group policy actually gets applied. Alright, so when does this group policy stuff actually all take effect? Now here's the thing, there's actually a group policy setting for processing group policy. Actually 3 or 4 of them, both on the user side and on the computer side. But before we jump into that, let's talk about this. When a user first logs into a machine, client or server, doesn't matter, Windows checks and applies any new group policy objects from Active Directory. Okay? So our client machine, our Vista machine, calls up Active Directory and says, hey dude, you got anything new? Active Directory says, yes, I do. It goes ahead and grabs it. If it doesn't, well, obviously life goes on as normal. Now when you run gp-update/force, the new policy settings are pushed down right then. Some of them are going to apply immediately. Some of them are going to apply on the next logon, though. It depends on the settings. Okay? Some settings require a log off and log on to actually apply. Now, when it comes to matters of software installation GPOs, especially that are applied on the computer side, the installation happens at the next restart. Now, if you publish software using the user side of the group policy object, then that's different. Then the software is actually available to install on demand for that user, assuming they have permissions to actually install. But that's also a good reason why it's a better idea to install it on the computer side, because then we don't have to worry about whether or not if the user has the ability to install software or not. We don't have to worry about user account control. The software downloads and installs on the next restart. Bada boom, bada bang, you're done. For other user side and computer side GPOs, I should say, it depends on what we call the group policy refresh interval. Now there's a couple of group policy objects, like I was saying, that control group policy. And I know it's kind of funny, but you know that's the way it is. Basically, here's what the refresh interval is. It's a certain amount of time that computers wait to go talk to your domain controllers to see if there's anything new on the group policy side that they need to grab. Now, by default, that's 90 minutes. I'll talk with you about that in just a second. Now, there's a thing called background processing, and background processing, what it does is it actually processes your group policy settings without you knowing about it. It happens in the background. And there's actually, you can actually turn that on or off, and we'll talk in just a minute about why you might want to do that. But this group policy refresh interval and this background processing stuff, these policy settings can be applied at the organizational unit level. Most of the time, though, they're applied at the default domain policy level. Now, we haven't really talked a lot about the default domain policy, but it's just the policy for the entire domain. I mean, there's nothing special about it. It's just a policy that is linked at the domain level and filters down through everything else. So tell you what, let's go ahead and bounce back on over to Client 1 and through Remote Desktop. Let's take a look at the default domain policy. I want to show you where these group policy refresh interval settings are at, and I also want to talk to you about this little background processing thing on the default domain policy. Alright, so back over here on Client 1, let's go to DC1. Let's go ahead and let's exit out of our command line option here, and let's close our group policy management editor. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and roll up our New York OU and our group policy objects. Here is the default domain policy. It is linked to globalmatics.com, the entire domain. So basically, this is your boss policy. Okay? Everything underneath globalmatics.com will be subject to this policy unless you use block inheritance, unless you use security filtering, and these other techniques we've been talking about through the different videos. But the default domain policy isn't anything special. It's just a policy object. You could delete it if you wanted to and create your own domain policy and name it whatever you want, and it wouldn't be anything different. Okay? We're going to go ahead and let's edit this guy. And I want to take you into the computer configuration side first, and we'll take a look at the policies in there. Then next we'll take a look at some user configuration group policy settings as well. When I go here into the administrative templates and into system, let me go ahead and stretch this guy out again. We have the group policy settings. I'm going to go ahead and go to the standard tab over here so we can see all of this stuff. Here are all of the policies that control group policies. Or at the very least, how group policies are actually processed. Now I've shown you one of these already, the group policy loopback processing mode. We've actually taken a look at that and enabled that. I want to talk to you about the group policy refresh interval. Okay, let's go ahead and open this guy up. The group policy refresh interval for computers basically just determines how often a computer goes back and talks to the Active Directory to see if there's anything new. Now when we enable it, we can specify how many minutes to wait before it goes and checks to see if there's any new stuff. Now there's also a random time that's added to this amount of minutes. Okay, the default is set at 30, so somewhere between 90 and 120 minutes all of our computers are going to go talk to the domain controller, but we don't want all of our clients all at once going and talking to the domain controller, because the domain controller is going to freak out and say, dude, I got too many requests. We don't want the domain controller to freak out, because remember, it's the brain of our network. So instead, what we do here is we actually specify this random time for the refresh interval. So some computers are going to go talk to the domain controller right at 90 minutes. Some are going to talk to it at 95 minutes. Some are going to go talk to it at 100 minutes, and so on and so forth. So somewhere between 90 to 120 minutes, all of our client computers are going to go talk to the domain controller, see if there's anything new in the group policy side, download it, and process it. Now let's go to the explanation tab for this. Again, these explanation tabs really tell us almost all of the story. This particular group policy specifies how often group policy for computers is updated while the computer is in use. So this really happens in the background, right? So this setting specifies a background update rate only for group policies in the computer configuration folder. And this is kind of a duh statement, but I mean, group policy for the computer is always updated when the system starts. And just so you know, the settings that we see here, 90 and 30, these are actually the defaults. Okay, so if you did nothing, if you just didn't even configure this policy at all of your computers would wait at least 90 minutes before trying to update the group policy settings. Now you can specify the update rate whenever you want. If your bandwidth is getting sucked up like an 8-year-old with a pixie stick, if there's just too much network traffic happening on your network, you could specify even up to 45 days. Now that's a little crazy, okay? For most networks, 90 minutes is going to be just fine. But you may want to specify, go back and check every 2 or 3 days. That's not a bad thing either. And it's going to save you a little bit of bandwidth. All right, now let me scroll down here just a second. I want to point out something to you. It tells us right here that this setting is only used when the turn off background refresh of group policy setting is not enabled. Okay? So there's a very specific policy. Let's go ahead and let's flip over here and let's take a look at this one. Here it is. Turn off background refresh of group policy. So as long as this particular setting is not enabled, not configured, or disabled, then we can use that group policy refresh interval for computers, okay? But if this guy is enabled, if that background refresh of group policy, if this one is enabled, well, then this group policy refresh interval for computers is basically null and void. Okay? So we need to make sure that turn off background refresh of group policy is not enabled, because this policy controls the computer updating its own group policy settings from the domain controller in the background. Okay? So if you turn off the background refresh of group policy, this policy setting here becomes null and void. Now also, this setting establishes the update rate for computer group policy. To set an update rate for user policies, well, there's another setting for that. Let's go take a look at that guy real quick. Okay, let's scroll up here, and I'm going to shrink up the computer configuration section and expand the user configuration setting. Again, same thing. We're going into policies, administrative templates, and into system. Okay? And now here are the group policy settings for the user side. Now we still have the group policy refresh interval for users. Okay, that's still active here. Let's go ahead and open this guy up. Looks identical, doesn't it? Yep, it's pretty much identically the same, with the exception that we're actually doing the user side of group policy now. Again, this is specifying how long the computer actually waits to go talk to the domain controller to get new settings for the user side, and it does this again in the background, right? Let's go ahead and scroll down here to see if there's anything else. Again, the same thing. If the turn off background refresh of group policy setting is enabled, this setting is ignored. Okay? So might want to kind of keep that in mind if you're going to be using and manually configuring group policy refresh intervals. Make sure that the background refresh turn off policy is not enabled. Alright, so we have taken a look here at a couple of different group policies that control group policy, right? I know it's kind of redundant, but I mean, that is the way it is. I mean, there is group policy that controls group policy, especially on the computer side. You notice on the computer side that we have a lot of group policies that relate to how group policy is processed. A lot of these you may not never need, okay? I mean, a lot of these, if you don't do anything with, it's probably not going to affect a lot of things in your network. Group policies only cause trouble when they're turned on, okay? If you leave them off, chances are they're not going to cause you any trouble. Your network might be less secure, and your users might be able to do more stuff than what you want them to, but group policy rarely causes any trouble when it's turned off, unless one policy relies on another policy. But again, if you turn off the background refresh, if we enable this guy, then it doesn't matter what kind of refresh interval you set for your users or computers. It doesn't make any difference, because the background refresh policy, if it's enabled, it nullifies the user side and the computer side of the refresh interval. All right, let's go ahead and not configure that. I think we have pretty much beat this horse to death. So let's go ahead and let's bounce over to the slides. Let's do some wrap up, and let's talk about what we have accomplished, what we've talked about and looked at, and then we'll go on to the next video. Alright, so after this video, let's talk about where we're at right now. What we've done in our network so far is we have created a new policy, our PDF reader installation, and we have installed software on all of our machines, and we've done just a little bit of observation in terms of some group policy that controls group policy at the default domain level. Remember that your default domain policy isn't really anything special other than it affects everything in your domain. I just probably want to take just a second here and kind of go back over the default domain policy for just a second. Your default domain policy is usually the least restrictive, okay? I think we've mentioned this before, but I want to drive this home. Your default domain policy is usually least restrictive, and then we get more restrictive when we start doing group policy at the OU level. Okay, so we restrict based upon what we feel is going to prevent users from breaking stuff and getting into stuff that they shouldn't. All right, so that's where we really ended up at. Let's go ahead and let's talk a little bit about the big words that we covered in this particular video. First of all, group policy software installation. Sometimes, by the way, you might hear someone call this GPSI. So remember, it's just a function of group policy that allows you to install software to computers with accounts within the scope of the group policy object. Now, what do we mean by within the scope? Well, we're talking about what user or computer accounts are affected by the group policy depending upon where it's linked at. Now, we linked our group policy object at the NY computers level, and it just filtered down through inheritance to all of our other machines in our network. .msi package, Microsoft installer, sometimes called a Windows installer officially. You might hear those terms used synonymously, by the way, but just remember that you need an MSI package to install software using group policy. Publish option in group policy software installation is an option to make software available to install on demand. We don't generally do that very often, though, because we most oftentimes will assign software to specific computers, so that way the software will install automatically on the computer restart. So after this video, you should be able to create a software installation GPO. You should be able to describe the differences between using software installation GPO on the computer side and on the user side. You should be able to correctly assign, publish or use some advanced options for the software installation GPO, remember, using those options in the advanced section, you can upgrade your software, and using the group policy object setting itself, you can actually uninstall software as well. So remember, you can install, upgrade, and remove software using these techniques and this little setting we're looking at right now. You should be able to set the group refresh policy interval on the default domain policy. Even though we actually didn't set it, we actually did not configure that at all. You should now know at least where to go for that. And you can also should be able to enable or disable background policy processing on the default domain policy. Remember, all we did there, it's just one group policy setting, and it's that turn off background processing for group policy. I mean, it sounds more complicated than it is. And remember, that's either enabled or disabled. There's not very many instances where you're going to want to turn off background policy processing. I can only think of the only thing that you might want to do that is if you want to control exactly when group policy objects affect your computer, and you'll have to do that using gpupdate/force. Okay, so if you don't have background policy processing turned on, you'll have to do a gpupdate/force every single time you make an alteration to one of your group policy objects. So you know that might not be that big a deal, right? But just so you know, you'll have to do that if you have that particular setting enabled. Okay. Friends, that is it for this particular video. In the next video, we need to start talking about password policies. There is some very cool stuff in Server 2008 that has been extended in terms of password policies. So we're going to jump headlong into that in the next video. So I'll see you then.